Welcome to part 2 of building a personal fitness analytics dashboard with PyScript, and we're going to continue developing a PyScript dashboard from where we last left off. Now, if you want to follow this whole project from my first line of the code to the last, then go to my channel and check out that first part of the video and then continue to this. Now, where we last left off, we have this awesome looking PyScript app. I have this on my web browser right now, and we're going to continue developing it to its final form. So we don't have any of this top row statistics yet, right? And we're gonna also add some tweaks to not just make this icon looks good, but also make sure that they're gonna be mobile responsive. So the whole point of this dashboard is that I want to wake up every day and just take a look at it and just feel a little bit more motivated. And the analytics here looks pretty good, right? The trends, the charts, it goes a pretty long way to sort of visualize and put things in perspective. It helps with your sort of self-reflection and trying to understand, you know, whether or not you accomplish all those fitness goals that you set up to accomplish at the beginning of the year usually. This is what the end result looks like, and we're gonna try and work our way back from here. So to begin with, let's take a look at this top row. Let's actually start to filter in. Let's try to populate the numbers here. So we actually need PyScript to return 4 numbers: 61, 248, 63, and 311. We need these 4 statistics to be returned to us so that we could use these statistics and on the front end, and generate the nice aesthetic sort of cosmetic layer on top of that, right? So but we do need PyScript to generate, we do need the Python to generate these 4 values, and we pass that values onto the front end. How do we go about doing that? So let's go into our code now, and let's take a look. Let's close out dashboard. We don't need dashboard. We're done with that. Let's look at get stats, and I'm gonna hit Control B to take away the sidebar. And what we're gonna do, actually you probably don't need to see my face. I could take away my face now. I'm gonna say bye now. I'm gonna come back on later so that you could have more space. So I'm gonna drag this, and I'm gonna hide myself now, and you won't see me now, but that's okay. We get to say goodbye later. All right. So now you can see the whole thing in full screen. That's much better. Okay, so we have get stats. We need to have 61, 248. 63 and 311.67. So where do we get these statistics from, and how do we go about that? Now the first one is total number of runs. We actually kind of have that already. This is the total number of runs, right? So total number of runs is going to be one of the figure that we need to return. We need to return altogether 4 figures. Okay, 4 figures. We need to return 4 figures. So how do we return that? So it turns out what you need to do is to just basically have the print somewhere in there. I know it's now gonna look crazy because you say, oh, but if I print that, it's just gonna be like one vanilla naked statistic. So how is that gonna look good? But that's okay. Let's go ahead and do that first. I'm gonna say print, and I know that I need to print 4 values anyway, so it probably makes sense to just create a new variable and say top rows and something like that, and gonna put like the first value is just gonna be the number of runs, because that's the first value. I know I need that already. So number of rows. I would need to return that. I need to print that top row somewhere. So you would think something like print top rows would work, but what if there are things like a tuple? How would that be printed? How would that be used on the front end? So the better way to do that is to return this as a JSON, so that you can consume the JSON either using HTML, JavaScript, any kind of thing that works on the front end. So what I want to do is that I don't want to actually just print that out. If I just save this, right now, let me just save this and let me show you what I mean by that first. And if I get back into my tracking run, and now it's going to refresh because I just modified the code here. So what you see is that there is going to be a tuple. A tuple, luckily for us, say there's a tuple here. I know this is not a tuple yet, but let's say we have a tuple here. So number of runs, this is not number of rows, but number of runs. Okay, so let's save that. It's going to print that out. But what happens if we have something like a Python object or a Python dictionary? So how is that going to work, right? Now there's a 61 here. So we want this to be consume, and we want to be able to use JavaScript to populate that into the top, those numbers up there. So how do we do that? So I could, the standard way of doing that, and probably the best way of doing that, is to just use JSON. And so you want to say import JSON. This is a standard library, part of the standard Python library. So we're gonna bring that up there, and then I'm gonna, instead of saying print top rows, I'm actually going to have my JSON dumps top rows. So I'm going to say JSON dumps, and I want to print my top rows in here. Okay, so that's the first statistics. Now let's take a look at what else do we need. Now the other statistic we need is the walk distance. So walk distance, how do we calculate the walk distance? Well, that's actually fairly simple as well. So all we need to do is to find all the walk distance, find all the runs where the type is equals to 1, and then basically take that and take the sum of that. That's a total walk distance, right? So let's go ahead and do it right here as well. So we can say these are all for top row statistics. This area, this are for the top row statistics, right? And we're gonna just say here, just add a few more, and we're gonna duplicate that and bring that all the way down. So we know that all of this, this is the area where we contain all the stuff that are related to top row statistics. I'm just making it maybe a little bit more legible. And so what is the second statistic? Sorry, the second statistic is walk distance. All right, so how do we get walk distance? So walk distance, you would just do a subset. So maybe just do a quick indexing, and then from there you would find all of the distance and you sum them up. So we could say something like total walk distance, right? And we could say df. Why df? Because if you only use runs, you already have only type equals to 1. That's not really gonna work, is it? You want to find walk type 6, you want to go back to df again. So I want to say df, and what do we want to have? We want to say df here. You want to say where the type is equal to 6. So it's very similar to what you write here, right? Very similar to what you write here. And if you want to actually say, if you only count walks that are more than 50 meters, then you can also add an and say distance. So if you accidentally started a walk activity, that is not going to be counted because it doesn't exceed 50. So you can sort of set a low threshold there, sort of a flaw to say that if you, to count it as a walk, you need to walk beyond 30 meters, for example. You can do that, all right? I'm not gonna worry about that, but what I want to do is I want to take all the distance. So I want to take all the distance of the middle, and I want to sum them. So I could do something like this, and I could do sum. But this is gonna give me the meters, and I don't want the meters because there will be a huge amount of numbers. So what I want to do is I want to say this is km, and then what I can do is take this and divide by 1000. That would give me the kilometers. So kilometers would just be divided by 1000, and now I could take this and I could put a comma and pass that in. And now I have my second statistic. So let me take a look at the third statistics. That's the run distance. Run distance is even easier than the one above because you can say run. Actually, let's name it the same. Let's say total run distance. So instead of walk, I'm gonna say run. And then here I don't even need all of this anymore because all I need to do is take runs, because runs is already subsetted here, and I take the distance dot sum and then just divide it by 1000. So that's even easier, right? So let's also put a comma, copy that, and then we're gonna change this walk to run. Okay, so that's fairly simple. And then finally, what do we have? We have the walk plus run distance. Okay, that you shouldn't need me to tell you what to do. Okay, so all you need to do is to just sum them up. I want to prevent the fact that I want to prevent any kind of like very large digits. What if like 4.7698154443 whatever? So how do I round that up before I pass it on? I could just add a round. So you know, what would be a good idea is to just take all of this, say round, and put that in, put 3, do the same thing here. So take out all of this, put a round, copy that, put that 3 in there, and then you want to do the same thing. You want to set the round, and then you want to do the walk distance plus the run distance. So you want to take walk, and you want to add run, and you want to take 3 decimal points of that, and that will be the 4 numbers. So let's have all of them ready. Let's save them, and now if we go back to our web app, now it's going to start to render, and when it's done rendering, we would see our 4 statistics there. Okay, we do see our 4 statistics. So that's 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, how do we take this and then wrap them into key statistics? So let's take a look at our final product. Okay, our final product looks like that. How do we make this looks good, and how do we make them with that top row? Okay, so one thing I would do is I would go back to my HTML now, because now I'm done with the I know that my server has returned that 4 results. So now I need to just change out the look of that. So one thing I could do is to bring in another sort of CSS library called material design, and there is something called the material design bootstrap that sort of wrap around the bootstrap and give you the material design effect. And material design, by the way, if you don't know about that, it's basically Google's design language. So it makes it look like Google, you know, you look at the buttons and stuff, the cards and stuff. So so we need to bring that in first, right? So let's go into index.html and let's start to do that. Index.html, if you look at where is the link? Okay, so this is Roboto, all right? We didn't actually even end up using Roboto, but we're probably gonna add another font later. So what we can do is we can add a comment here to say this is where we add the bootstrap. So that's material design bootstrap, all right? We add the link in there. This is something you can just Google material design, and then just copy that. And the normal one would just be something like mdb.min.css, and that's kind of how it looks like without you doing anything. And now it would just give you the material effect. Nothing should change too dramatically, but what I also realized is you could just add a dark there. So you said mdb.dark.min.css, and now it would have the whole sort of dark theme applied to it. Again, nothing should change here because we haven't actually used any of the material designs components, so nothing very visible there. But we could also add the MDB script, so the JavaScript, that's the CSS. We also want to add a JavaScript. You can add all of this at the bottom anyway. You don't need to put them all up front. You could take off that, and maybe, like, for example, script is probably a good idea to put them at the bottom because they're probably going to be heavy anyway. So you bring this, and right before the closing tag, you could have that here, right? You could do it that way. You could bring in jQuery if you want, because it's probably easier in some of the ways you could use jQuery to just target the element and then fit the numbers in. You could do that. It's pretty lightweight anyway, so you could bring that in as well. And I think that's kind of it. That's kind of all we need. Now, if we inspect element and we look at the these statistics here, so let's do an inspect. You see that the statistics are right up here, and it's assigned the ID and then it append that by -1. So since this is the first thing that come up, we want to basically write a nifty script to say that, okay, when that is loaded, so basically when the numbers here are loaded, take those numbers and sort of use those numbers in a smart way, right? How do we wait for this to be loaded? Because when we first refresh the page, now notice this again, if I refresh the page again, if I say enter, see the numbers are not out here. So if you just use jQuery to find those numbers, you're not going to find anything. So how do we say wait until the numbers are there? And then once they are ready, so once this element name notable1 is ready, when there's content in there, do something. So for that, you can try to figure that out on your own. I'm sure there are many ways to accomplish that, but for me, I already wrote the code for that anyway, so I'm just gonna use the same code that I found in my index.html. So I'm not gonna try to rewrite all of this. So the relevant part of that is gonna be this area. So I'm gonna just copy the script area, and I'm gonna just say copy that, and I'm gonna close script. Okay, the rest I don't really need now, and so I'm gonna just paste it right into my right up here, or maybe rather at the bottom. So when everything is done, because that it goes from top to bottom anyway, right? So that's the script. We're gonna close the script. Okay. So we basically I have this function for you called wait for element. So wait for element, basically it's if you have any experience in JavaScript, you can probably try to read this on your own and try to understand what it does. But really what it is to really just wait for an element and say that if and this is done in a promise, in a async await a paradigm. So once the element has been loaded, okay, it's already painted, then you can take that element, you can use the document to query to take the selector, and then you can do something with it using the then. All right, so because you're waiting for a promise and the promise is returned, you use a then. Okay, so I name it wait for element. So what you can do is you can say wait for element, and what do you want to wait for? Now remember in the script there we see that it's actually notable1. So we want to say notable1, and we say that when it's done, then do something with it. So what do you want to do with it? So for example, you could very quickly just, let's say, take the text content of that. So you can say you could say let, I guess you don't even need var, you can say let stats equals to, in fact it could even just be a const, but let's use let first, and then if there's reason to change things we would, and we say element the text content. Okay, and then if you want to, you could just do a console log just to make sure that you're printing out all of this correctly. So I could just say something like stats, print that out. Okay, and I could basically do stats. Okay, and I'm gonna just save all of this. Now I'm gonna go inspect element. Now I'm gonna go into my console, and I hope that I should see my, and you should do a stats. Okay, here we go. So stats printed 61, 248, 63, and 311.67. Okay, so that's good. That's printed out. Now, what I want to do next is I want to use this for figures. And if you have any experience in JavaScript, or maybe, you know, if you have even used jQuery, maybe even if you haven't used jQuery, this is very easy to learn anyway, so don't worry about that. But what I want to do next is I want to say, take this figure. I don't need the console log anymore. I know that it's there. I just want to verify that really quickly just now. And I want to be able to say something like, wait for the whole document to be ready. This is a jQuery thing. You say wait for the whole thing to be ready. When it's ready, go and perform a certain action. And so the action, we don't need a name. We just call a function like that right away. And so make sure that everything is ready. And then from there, you want to take that element and pass that in. So right now we don't have anything to pass it anywhere. But let's say we have something like this. Let's say we have this. Let's say we create not a div, but let's say here we have ID top stats, right? If we want to pass in this into top stats, we could now, and we could say something like take the top stats and pass that value in there. So we could say something like take top stats. Oops. That's the ID, so top stats, and want to say take that and fill it with a text. What would the text be? Let's say we take the first value, or let's say take text stats, right? And now it's gonna find the top stats div, any div with the ID top stats, and it's gonna pass that value in there. So now you see that the value is in there now. Okay, that's good. So all we need to do is to format them nicely. All right. So in order to create all the cards and stuff like that, you could again go ahead and write your own stuff, but we probably don't want to do that. We're just gonna do something really easy and quick. So I'm gonna go ahead now and into my top stats, and I'm gonna change a couple of things. First of all, in my top stats, okay, I'm gonna have add a class to it called row, because I want those other things to be columns. I want this to be a column. So you're gonna look like this, column. All right, and then from there, within each one of them, I want to have a column, like I said. So you could say something like div column, and within the column itself, you want to have I can give it like column, and I can say column. If it's a very large screen, then each one will take 3 of them. Meaning each one of them will take 3 columns, so then I can fit 4 columns because it's a 12 grid system. So if I say div call xl3, it means I can fit 3 because they sum up to be 12. All right, but if it's a smaller screen, then I want to take half of them. So if it's a smaller screen, take half, meaning on a small screen, I could then, this would give you the effect of like I could then fit into something like that, 6. Okay, so that's column sm6. And then what about on a really small screen? So anything like a mobile device, for example, then I want to take the full width. So if I'm going to do that, then what it's going to do is it's going to give me this. Okay, so that's what it's doing. On a very large screen, it can take 3 to fit 4 of those cards. And if it on a small screen, it can take 6 + 6 to fit 2 of those cards. On a very small screen, take the whole thing. And make sure you give a bit of margin. So margin bottom 4. So give it a bit of margin at the bottom so that it doesn't all crowd together, right? So that's what I'm doing there with that. And then I'm just gonna go ahead and just create a div again, and this time I'm gonna call it card. So where did all of this come from? If you look at Bootstrap and you search for card, you just look at that. You can look at the example. There is this thing, the card body, the card title, the card text. So what I'm doing is that, and the more you do this, the more familiar, and at some point you don't even need to refer to this anymore. But if you want to, you can open that up and sort of just refer to them as you go. So for example, I can have a card body here, and that will be div class card body. And within the card body itself, now I could try to maybe have things like justify and make things look better. So for example, I could use a div again, and again, this is not really a CSS class, so don't worry about having to know all of this stuff. You can just pretty much copy and paste from what you see on my screen. But I'm going to justify content, and some of these will make more sense later when you see them, and some of these are really just sort of like memory anyway. You remember how to use the card, and every time you create a project, you use the same thing, then you remember them. And then I want to basically have a padding, and padding, you can have padding on the x-axis or on the y-axis, meaning either left or right, or either top or bottom. I want to say the padding, and when it's on a medium screen, I want to say 1. Okay, that's it. So P, if you see something like PX, that's basically padding on the x-axis. PY, padding on the y-axis. PR, padding to the right. PL, padding to the left. Same thing for M. ML, margin to the left. MR, margin to the right. MB, which is what you see up here, margin to the bottom. All right. So then we have a div again. We want to say this is align, self, center. Sorry for not really explaining all of this stuff, but this is good. And I'm gonna say an icon in here, Because you know, some of these are like really CSS stuff that is really not of a lot of value to many of you, so I don't want to like spend too much time on that. Then we're gonna have a text, and it's gonna just push the text to the right, and then here we just have a h5, and here I'm just gonna give it an ID and say this is basically total number of runs. Okay, and then maybe if I want to, I could have a p and explain that a bit. So I can say class, this one I want to give it a bit of margin as well, and maybe margin of 0 at the moment. Later I can increment that, and I want to say this is total number of runs. Let me just save all of that, and before I do that, this is the column. So I know that I need 4 of such cut, so I'll copy that, paste second, third, fourth, save that. And then if I go back to my track and run, I should see my 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, it's not doing anything right at the moment, so let's wait for it to refresh. I think we might have missed out, okay, the column itself. Yeah, we need to close another div here, and so that is the right one. So let's copy this one instead. You're not gonna have the, and we copy that 4 times. This could have been an extra one, so let's remove that. And we need to fix all the ID because ID needs to be unique. So ID number of runs, we want to put this to, this is the first one, I believe, yep. Then total number of runs, this would be the second. And we want to do the same for the third. So again, that should be 3. And I want to do it again, and that will be 4. Okay. And that will be 4. So let's save that, all of that. So now we have 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so we have the icon, we have total number of runs. Obviously all of this don't yet make sense, but we could fix that. So the first div ID, let's see what we want to name all of them. So if we refer to the finished product, we have the total number of runs, walk distance, run distance, and the walk and run distance. So we want to make sure that we name them accordingly. So let's take a look at the first one. What do we name them? We name them total number of runs. Okay, that's okay, that makes sense. So we take away the 1, and then the second one, we want to name them, and you don't want this to be total number of runs anymore. You want this to be walk distance. So actually, that's quite walk distance. And then here you want to name it, what do I name it here? Walk distance km. So let's do it walk distance km. So walk distance and km. All right. And then what do we have? Next one, we want to have run distance. So we want to have something very similar to walk distance. We want to say run distance, and this would be run distance, not ream, but run distance, and we want to put km. I can't really tell from this font whether km is capitalized or not, because everything is going to be capitalized anyway if we use that kind of font, right? So let's just keep it that way first. And then I want to say the last one is run and walk distance. So run, walk distance. Okay, and what do we have here? We say walk plus run distance. So I'm just going to copy this so that I have exactly what I want here. Just going to copy that, and I'm going to completely delete all of this. Replace it with walk and run distance. All right. So we now have all this unique ID, and now we just need to float those values back into that sort of each of the h5, right? So instead of top stats, we're gonna have first one is called total number of runs, I believe. Total number of runs. That's good, right? So we're gonna keep that, and we say text. It's just gonna take the first value of that. So we can take the first value of that, and we're just gonna copy a couple of times because all we need is to delete this. And now we can say this is 1, this is 2, this is 3. Okay, really simple stuff. And now I don't need that to be total number. I need this to be walk distance, and I believe the next one is run distance because I named them very similarly. And then the last one I named them run underscore walk underscore this. Okay, run underscore walk underscore this. Now if I save all of this now, it should give you the right statistic. We haven't yet found the icon, but we could get the right. Okay, there we go. So all the right statistics. We just need to fix up the icon, so we give them proper icons. So for that, let's bring in the library, and we're gonna use Font Awesome for that. And you can just search for that, like Font Awesome, and you can say CDN. I think that's like Cloudflare has that CDN.js, I guess. This one, right? So just copy all of that. Just copy the URL.
and just paste it back in there. All right, so this is 6.1.1. You can also use a stable version 6.0.0. That's also fine, but whichever you pick, just bring in Font Awesome. So I'm just gonna copy the one that I just showed you there, and I'm gonna bring it all the way at the top. Generally, any kind of like CSS and stuff, I feel comfortable bringing them in the head, and any kind of scripts, I typically, unless there's strong reason not to, I bring them to to the end of the body, before the body tag, right? So I'm gonna say here, I'm gonna add Font Awesome for icons, right? And I'm gonna save that. All right, so now I have that. So everything is still good, and I also wanted to bring in that cool font typography. I know that this type of font, I know what this is called, and it's called the rock salt. So I could just search for it. I could say find Google font and search for rock salt, and it would just give you that. You just have to copy that, and it would also give you where to sort of how to get that, and you can just use that style. So if you like this, you can just use that style. So I have that as well, and it's gonna be in, so instead of saying add roboto font, I'm gonna say add roboto and rock salt. And I still haven't actually changed any of this stuff yet, but that's okay. Let's just bring that in first. And then now let's go to the icons and let's replace those icons. So the way I would do that is I would just search for the right icon. I would just say Font Awesome, and I would say icons. I click into that, and then let's see what kind of icons I want, right? So the first one, let's say this one, right? What is this? This is a stopwatch icon. So I could just search for stopwatch. All right, and just hit enter, and you will find all kinds of stopwatch. And the one that I want is this one, but you can find any other icons that you want. So you're just gonna copy that, copy this, and it gives you I class equals to something something. That's the one you want to copy, and you want to replace that with this. Okay, so you don't want to take away that, put that stopwatch in there, save it, and if you look at it, now you have the nice stopwatch, right? So you still have the numbers, but you can make it look a little bit better, or maybe even give it a different color and make it look slightly better and stuff. These are all fonts anyway, so you could change them. And for example, I could give it a different color just by adding a different text sort of style to it. So in this case here, I could say something like text and make it, let's say, success. And now it would have a different font. I can make it a little bit larger by saying font A, which is Font Awesome, and make it 2x or 3x, for example 3x, right? If I save that, and that will give it the effect. While we wait for that, now you see that there's a green, and now it's larger, three times as large. All right, now for walk distance, I want to just search for walk, so I'm just going to close that. I'm going to search for walk and press enter, and again I'm just going to find a person walking, copy that, and sort of just do the same thing for each one of them. All right, so let me just do it real quick, and I'm gonna do the same thing. So instead of text success, I'm gonna say text primary now, and I'm gonna say fx, fa, and I'm gonna put 3x as well. Okay, and I believe that's also running. So I'm gonna copy that, and again just copy that, paste that in here, and again I want to make it 3 times larger. So now I'm gonna say text info. Have I used info? No, success primary info. Okay, fa 3x, and then finally, what is the last icon? It's just a flag. Okay, it's just a flag. So let's go ahead and just use a flag. Maybe this one. Just copy that and replace all of this. Maybe this one I'll make it a little bit smaller. So I'm gonna say text. What else do I have? Warning. Haven't had warning, and then fa 2x. Okay, and I'm gonna save all of that. Press enter. No, I have them. See, so I have the total number of runs, walk distance, run distance, and that, and the numbers are gonna load up. So everything looks pretty okay. This one looks a little bit cramped. Yeah, it does look a little bit cramped, so we may need to fix that later. But let's go ahead and change all the fonts to be a little bit cooler first. So the way we do that is we could just go ahead and say something like, these are all in the text end. So I want to change all the text end to fit a nicer presentation style, to maybe change the font, maybe the font width, the font weight. So I could just open up my CSS now, and I could just add a text end and something like this, and I could say something like font family. And now I want to make my rock salt, because otherwise what's the point? Actually here I could change that to roboto as well. And let's see, we're gonna make it cursive, give it a cursive variant, and we're gonna make the font size slightly smaller because otherwise they're just gonna be really huge. So 7 emphasis, something like this. We're gonna save off that. So now it's gonna be Roboto, and you're gonna have the, all right, so this looks pretty good now because everything is just gonna be exactly the way we want it now. Maybe the colors are gonna be different, but you have to experiment. I think this is the danger, so you want to change. If you want this to be a bright red, you have to change one of the text to be danger. In fact, let's go and do that now. The index, so the walk itself, this one shouldn't be a text primary, it should be a text danger, I believe, to give it a red. Okay, so if you save that, now it's gonna be red. And yellow, this is what, yellow and green. I won't change them, I'll just leave it the way it is. If you want to change them, you can feel free to go and experiment with that. That is kind of it. That's how we actually take data and sort of pass that into the front end, and then use the front end to generate them, you know, make them look a little bit better, a little bit cooler. I think there's also one more thing. We need to hide this away, otherwise this looks really bad as well. It just hangs there around for no purpose because you already see those statistics up there and it doesn't look professional as well. So how do we hide them? This is quite easily done. So you go all the way back and you said that once you can do them at the end. You can say once you populate all these numbers, then you can hide them, or you can do them at the top. So I would, for me, I would just hide them at the top. I would just say take that and take element, add a style. In the style, give it a display and put it none. So that's the equivalent of you going into something like this one and right click and then add a style, which is under here, and then add display and add none. That's the equivalent of that, right? Except here we use code to achieve that. So if we save this, now all of this is going to load, except this notable one itself is going to be hidden away. And so now you have a very clean dashboard. Everything looks the way it should. And I would say the dashboard should be more centrally aligned. So for that, let's search for it. Let's search for dashboard. And this is it. Let's add a class here to say text center, right? Let's save that. And now it should be aligned to the middle, to the center. There are a few other things you could make, you could add to make this looks better. I feel like if you look at from a stylistic point of view, another thing you could do is to make the tables, the header of tables, look a little bit more stand out. Now it's pretty dull. So what you could do is you could just go ahead and look at this. You could, I guess you could. I'm tempted to just write something like this and then say table head. But I guess it's better off as its own because we want to change a couple of things as well. So table head, within table head, there's a table header. And I also want to make sure that if I have any kind of footer, the same thing happened to that. And I want to copy this into that. Actually, font size could be the same, I guess. We don't need to change the font size. But let's at least change the font family because that's what's the whole point of bringing in such a cool font without using it. And I want to make the font weight a little bit large, bolder as well. So you could use bolder if you want to. You could use a number like 700 if you want to. It's really kind of like you try and test things out and see if they looks good. And now it looks pretty much just like what we have. In fact, almost exactly like what we have. I'm gonna leave out the rest here. Like there are things like how do you watch how I built this and stuff. That's not important. But you could do that. If you want some sort of if you want a bit of a challenge without looking at my code, can you try to create this one, for example? So this is the first run ever recorded. This is the last run ever recorded within the data set. So in here, my first run happened to be on the 10th of January and the last run happened to be 30th of June. Obviously, I'm recording this on the 13th of July. So by now, there are more data. Maybe, I'll refresh this. But if you want a bit of a challenge, how do you programmatically create, get that data from Pandas and then use the same thing that you learn and pass that onto the front end? So maybe you can have that as an extra challenge. I'm not going to touch on that now because I think the main idea of what I really want to show you, that is already accomplished. And I feel like for the rest of it, I'll just leave you with it, and you should go ahead and try and experiment and try and make things look better, and I don't know, maybe come up with something more creative. And if you do have something more creative, then feel free to leave it in the comment section and I can showcase your work. Or if you have other ideas of what you want to see. I feel like this is one of those things that we don't cover enough because I see a lot of like PyScript tutorials around the internet, and they are like very, 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 very piecemeal, very, very small ad hoc projects. Like they're not like full-fledged dashboards. You don't think about them and like, oh, I would need Flask to achieve that, right? Like this is one of those things when if you look at what I have here, let me just show you what I have here. Up to this point, right? a lot of you would immediately think about Flask and like, oh, I would do that in Flask. I would, you know, have all this, but you could do that in just PyScript without even needing any of the setting up Python server or web server. You could just deploy this very easily. This is a very widely requested sort of scope anyway. A lot of you asked for like whether you want to see more of the Altair content. I managed to bring it in here. Some of you requested to want to see something that builds on top of Altair and then provides a little bit more depth on, you know, on a full project, not just something like Hello World-ish of PyScript. So I feel like this is a good opportunity. It fits my kind of need. I really wanted something like a personal dashboard like that anyway. Because MeFit, it's great. It just doesn't have great statistics. It doesn't have something like give you great aggregation overview. I wish there is an app that does that, but so far I don't really see any. So I decided that, hey, I'm going to create my own, and I decided to record the process of how I get about that. And so if you like it, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, share with a friend, and let me know your thoughts. Okay, if you want to see other kind of content, let me know. And I really had a lot of fun doing this because it's something I would use every single day. I wake up and this is the first thing I look at every day in the morning. And that's all I have time for today. I hope to catch you in a future video, and thank you and have a nice day. Bye.